What's good, folks? Khalid Bey. This episode will be a very interesting episode because we are discussing the conservative plan for the U.S. Department of Education. Very, very interesting subject matter. My effort will be to touch on what I believe are key points for consideration. I don't want to spend any time with inconsequentials. Let's get right to it. Let's talk. What's up, folks? Welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm your host, Khalid Bey. Before we dive into this episode's topic, I want to remind you, the viewer, of my intent on this show, which is to look into and discuss topics from a position of objectivity. I am not pushing any ideas onto anyone. I will not choose a side, but what I will do is expose and or eliminate, if possible, anything that appears impractical. It is my preference that you, the viewer, give due consideration to any subject matter that is discussed on this channel, and to not allow biases or lack of due diligence to be the cause of your own misinformation. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. Many of you are familiar with the actor Terrence Howard. Many of you are also aware of what he argues is a hidden secret in mathematics that he has discovered and is presenting to the world in an effort to correct what he argues is a fundamental error in multiplication specifically. To sum up Mr. Howard's position, he states that the math problem 1 times 1 does not and cannot equal 1. He argues that by the very fact that there are 2 digits, meaning 2 ones present, that 1 times 1 has to equal 2. In addition, 1 plus 1 certainly equals 2 because you are adding an additional 1 to an already existing 1, thereby presenting 2 ones. But where multiplication is concerned, it is necessary to understand the philosophy, or maybe more appropriately, the logic of multiplication. The logic is namely this: multiplication is about quantity, or the quantity of the digit in question. So 1 times 1 cannot equal 2 because the mathematical formula is simply asking how many ones are there. So 1 times 1 means 1 one time, or 1 times 2 means 1 2 times, or 5 times 5 means 5 5 times. I assume that you can see the problem with Mr. Howard's argument. Again, it is very important that we remain objective and unbiased. For the sake of clarity, the word objectivity means the fact of being based on facts and not influenced by our emotions or our beliefs. Allow me to make clear the meaning of another phrase referred to as confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is thus defined: the tendency of people to favor information that confirms or strengthens their beliefs or values. In this instance, a person will likely deny anything that conflicts with their beliefs or feelings despite all evidence to the contrary. So let's take the subject matter for what it is and not try to add any biased interpretation to satisfy our own aims. Okay? Cool. So as mentioned, there are a number of key components that warrant our attention. The first of which is advancing education freedom. Under this idea, their aim is empowering families to choose from a diverse set of educational options as key to reform and improve outcomes, and it can be achieved without establishing a new federal program. What they mean by this is families will choose an educational direction for their children that is in line with the child's talents and the family's goals. Now, I cannot disagree with this because in the city of Syracuse, New York, the graduation rate in the past was horrible. I mean, it's not that great now, but they were horrible back then. But when former Superintendent Sharon Contreras promoted the idea of school choice, which allowed students a select number of choices to ultimately determine what they were interested in learning, the graduation rates in the Syracuse City School District improved. This is another one of those areas where I cannot be hypocritical. I can be heard in the past making a statement that the social dynamics far outweighs the importance of academics to today's kid in these schools. You know, the fact that their friendships are falling apart or that their girlfriend dumped them, the fact that their clothes are not with the standard or their family is going through struggles, they don't have food at home, is preoccupying their mind to the neglect of whatever the teacher is talking about at the smart board. And so I saw the logic of providing kids access to things that they were interested in. Kids currently, for the most part, go to school out of obligation, but to provide them a choice to choose what they want to learn not only draws their attention because it's their interest, but will very likely improve their performance because of that interest. That logic cannot be denied. Another component of the conservative effort is providing educational choice for federal children. It goes on to read Congress has a special responsibility to children who are connected to military families and who live in the District of Columbia or who are members of sovereign tribes. Responsibility to serving these students should be housed in the agencies that are already serving these families. This measure seeks to give the responsibility of the management of the education of federal children to the agencies that already manage services for military families, families living in DC, and families living on Native American land. This would ideally provide those recipients a closer proximity to said services, allowing easier access and less bureaucratic red tape. I don't know. What do you think? Conservatives seek to pass the Department of Education Reorganization Act to reform, eliminate, and or move the department's programs and offices to the appropriate agencies, according to them. I'm going to tell you, you should go ahead and read through these ideas yourself. It's too much to deal with here. It would make this video very long. I'm not trying to bore you. This effort is a decentralization of the power over education policy. For example, education affairs of indigenous persons would be moved to the Bureau of Native American Affairs in the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department. Education issues for marginalized families will be moved into the Department of Human and Family Services, and the list goes on. Like I said, you should really read through these yourself and come to your own conclusions. The conservative agenda seeks to restore state and local control over educational funding. It goes on to read, as Washington begins to downsize its intervention in education, existing funding should be sent to states as grants over which they have full control, enabling states to put federal funding toward any lawful education purpose under state law. It's a little tricky. Now, this is understandably an area of concern for persons of color who are living in a select number of southern, Midwest, and Western states who are openly non supportive of communities of color. I don't live in those states, and I only experience many of those states through the media and social media. Those of you who reside in those states whose names shall remain nameless, you know better than I do about if there's any real cause for concern. According to this agenda, conservatives seek to treat taxpayers like investors in federal student aid. It goes on to read taxpayers should expect their investments in higher education to generate economic productivity. When the federal government lends money to individuals for post secondary education, taxpayers should expect those borrowers to repay. Translation: this measure seeks to eliminate the idea of a student loan relief program. One of the biggest issues with post secondary education is that many college students end up in debt. And while they may have obtained a degree or more, a host of graduates cannot find work that complements their area of study. The result is a very large number of underemployed college graduates. In addition, the conservative plan seeks to put in place accelerated and or affordable degree programs. Look, the value of education lies in the opportunity to put our acquired understanding to use. Society as it stands does not foster an environment that supports the college graduate. This next one is arguably my favorite. The conservative effort seeks to minimize bachelor degree requirements. It goes on to read the president should issue an executive order stating that a college degree shall not be required for any federal job unless the requirements of the job specifically demand it. The conservative effort also seeks to break up what they call accreditation cartels, who currently control policies on accreditation. Now, this is equally interesting. This may very well broaden the scope of what is considered accredited learning. This would indeed level the playing field and allow those who traditionally have been locked out of post secondary education to gain access to learning and skills and ultimately a more sustainable living condition. There is no question that there are issues with our educational system. I'll refer back to a previous video where I acknowledged the fact that many in my community refer to the school system as the public fool system. Look, I've never understood how kids could enter school and from the first grade up until the fourth grade perform in school like near geniuses. But by the time they graduate high school, they appear to be as dumb as a doorknob. We all have watched this happen. I am not an educator, not in the usual sense of the word, but I do know deterioration when I see it. If I'm being objective, if we are being objective, we would recognize what has been and would most certainly work to find a suitable solution. The conservative agenda also includes a segment on safeguarding civil rights. It goes on to read enforcing of civil rights should be based on a proper understanding of those laws, rejecting gender ideology and critical race theory. To translate, this measure seeks to remove topics and what they qualify as the promotion of gender identity from the educational system. It also seeks to remove the subject of critical race theory from the educational system as well. I am not a person who gets preoccupied with what anybody thinks about my skin color. But for those who prefer to ignore that racism is in fact systemic and is in the DNA of American society, stop playing. Everybody has a little bit of racial prejudice in them. Black people, white people, Latino people, Asian people. And if you argue to the contrary, you're a liar. Racial prejudice is a personal responsibility and will only be solved one person at a time. A true understanding of our differences cannot be achieved through suppression. Now, there is, though, simultaneously validity in the argument that race is a myth that has been weaponized. This is, in fact, true. The ultimate question here is now that we've created this abominable snowman, i.e., racial conflict, how do we get rid of it? All right, moving on. Conservatives also seek to stop what they call executive overreach. It goes on to read Congress should set policy, not presidents through pen and phone executive orders, and not agencies through regulations and guidance. National emergency declarations should expire absent express congressional authorization within 60 days after the date of the declaration. Now, this again is an example of returning certain powers back to Congress and eliminating the bureaucracies that currently control them. I will not argue whether the conservative plan is or is not a good idea. I will concede that billions are spent by our government on education, but poverty, which is much more mental than it is financial, never seems to decrease. Now, I know, some people are thinking, wait a minute, Khalid, you're a registered Democrat. They may see it as getting mixed messages. I told you that my intent here was to be objective. And without a doubt, I am a Democrat because I support the group survival dynamic. But I'm fiscally conservative. I don't mess with my money. If a homeless man is approached by a stranger who offers him food, the homeless man is not going to ask, to which party are you affiliated? The homeless man is going to say, feed me. Our educational system overall has to do better. As always, I'm going to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Let's Talk. Do me a favor, click the thumbs up on this video and click the subscribe button to stay abreast with what's going on. Again, Khalid Bey, Let's Talk. Catch you on the next one. Peace.